She laughed into her glass of champagne and said it just loud enough for people nearby to hear. "I didn't know they let staff wander into parties like this." The single dad standing in front of her didn't respond. He only adjusted his cuff, glanced at the room, and stayed silent, because the building she was standing in belonged to him. Before we continue, take a quiet second with me. If stories about dignity, judgment, and hidden truth matter to you, please tap like. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you enjoy calm, human stories like this, subscribe and stay with us. Now, let's go back to that party. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks late, slipped under the door of a small rental house that still smelled faintly of crayons and reheated soup. It was thick cardstock, heavy, embossed, the kind of thing people touched twice before opening. Evan Brooks almost threw it away, mistaking it for another fundraiser he couldn't attend. He worked too much. He parented even more. Luxury parties did not belong to his world anymore. But the address caught his eye. The Orion Building, 40 floors of glass and steel overlooking the river. A place he had visited often, though never for celebrations. He stared at the envelope longer than he meant to, then folded it and set it beside the sink. On the night of the party, Evan stood in his bedroom adjusting a borrowed jacket. It fit well enough, though the sleeves felt unfamiliar, like a version of himself he rarely wore. His daughter, Lily, sat on the bed behind him, legs crossed, watching with careful seriousness. She was 8 and had learned to read rooms too early. "You don't have to go," she said. "I know," he replied. "But you're going anyway." He smiled faintly. "Yes." The babysitter arrived at 7. Evan knelt, kissed Lily's hair, and promised he'd be back before midnight. She nodded, pretending not to care, but her eyes followed him to the door. The Orion lobby shimmered with restrained wealth. No banners, no loud music, just light, glass, and people who spoke softly because they never needed to raise their voices. Evan moved through them unnoticed, which was exactly how he preferred it. He didn't drink much. He didn't talk much either. He stood near the edge of the room, watching conversations bloom and die, laughter rising and falling like tides. The party was meant to celebrate a recent acquisition. Most people assumed Evan was there as an assistant or a consultant, or someone's +1. No one asked. That changed when Miranda Hale noticed him. She was striking in a way that demanded attention without asking permission. Her dress was sharp, red, deliberate. Her posture suggested ownership of every space she entered. She spoke with confidence, sharpened by success, and surrounded by people who agreed with her often. She glanced at Evan, then at his empty glass, then back to him. "Are you lost?" she asked, smiling. "No," he said calmly. She laughed lightly, turning to the man beside her. "That's adorable. He thinks he's not." A few people smiled, someone chuckled. Evan felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not anger, recognition. He had felt this before, in courtrooms and meetings where people underestimated him because he didn't announce himself loudly enough. "I didn't know they let staff wander in here," Miranda added, lowering her voice just enough to make it cruel instead of kind. Evan looked at her, really looked this time. He saw intelligence there, ambition, and something brittle underneath. "I'm not staff." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Then whose guest are you?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, because he knew what it would do to the room. "I received an invitation," he said. Miranda smiled wider. "So did everyone." The man beside her shifted uncomfortably. A woman across the circle looked away. The moment hung there, heavy and visible. Evan could have ended it then. He could have said his name, his title. He could have watched their faces change shape. He didn't. Instead, he excused himself quietly and walked toward the balcony. The city spread out below, alive and indifferent. He rested his hands on the rail and breathed. Inside, Miranda shrugged and turned back to her drink. The room moved on. But someone had noticed. From across the floor, A gray-haired man watched Evan through the glass. He had been there longer than most. He knew the building better than anyone. He also knew exactly who Evan Brooks was, and he smiled. Evan noticed her before she noticed him. She stood near the center of the room, framed by glass walls and city light, holding a champagne flute like it belonged to her. Her laugh carried just enough edge to turn heads. It wasn't loud, it was practiced, the kind of laugh that signaled comfort with being watched. Evan stayed where he was, close to the wall, hands folded, eyes low. He had learned long ago that visibility was a choice. Tonight, he hadn't chosen it. She drifted closer, scanning faces, weighing worth with quick glances. When her eyes landed on him, they paused, just a fraction too long. Her gaze dropped to his jacket, his shoes, the way he stood slightly apart from the room. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She leaned in, voice light, careless. "I didn't know they let staff wander into parties like this." It was said softly, but not quietly enough. A few people nearby looked over, curious. Evan felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Not anger, recognition. He'd heard versions of this before. He didn't respond. He adjusted his cuff, glanced past her toward the windows, and stayed silent. Silence had become his armor. She tilted her head, amused by his lack of reaction. "Relax," she added, lifting her glass. "I'm just joking." But there was no apology in her tone. She turned away, already bored, already moving on. The moment passed for everyone else. For Evan, it stayed. He stepped toward the balcony doors, needing air. Outside, the city hummed, distant and indifferent. He rested his hands on the railing, breathing slowly. The Orion building rose around him, familiar in a way no person ever was. He knew every floor, every maintenance schedule, every quiet corner. He'd signed off on the lighting that made the lobby glow like this. He'd approved the glass that reflected the river. None of it mattered tonight. Not here. Inside, conversations shifted. Laughter rose and fell. Evan returned to the room, blending back into the edges. He watched people interact the way he always did, noticing patterns. Who leaned in, who interrupted, who listened only to respond. He saw her again across the room, now speaking animatedly to a man in a tailored suit. The man nodded too eagerly. She touched his arm when she laughed. Evan looked away. An older woman approached him, holding a small plate. "You should eat," she said gently, as if she knew him. He shook his head, smiling politely. "I'm fine." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right." She moved on. Evan wondered if she recognized him. Some did, most didn't. He preferred it that way. A server passed with a tray of drinks. Evan reached for water. The server paused, looking at him closely. "Mr. Brooks?" Evan met his eyes. The server's expression shifted, quickly masked. "I didn't know you were attending tonight." Evan inclined his head. "I had time." The server nodded, suddenly stiff, and moved away faster than necessary. A ripple of attention followed him, subtle, curious, dangerous. She noticed then the woman with the champagne. Her eyes tracked the server, then found Evan again. This time, her smile faltered. She watched him more carefully, reassessing. Evan felt it and disliked it. He didn't want recognition, not like this. He turned toward the hallway leading away from the main room, intending to leave early. He'd done enough. Before he could slip out, a man stepped into his path, tall, confident, the kind who enjoyed introductions. "Evan Brooks," he said, extending a hand. "Didn't expect to see you here." Evan took the hand briefly. "Neither did I." The man laughed, loud. "Well, it's good for people to see the owner show up now and then." The word landed hard. Owner. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Evan felt the shift immediately. The room recalibrated. People looked at him differently now, with interest, with calculation.
Across the room, her face drained of color. She stared, glass frozen halfway to her lips. Evan released the man's hand and stepped back. "Enjoy your evening," he said quietly, and continued toward the exit. She followed. He heard her heels before he saw her, sharp against the floor. "Wait," she said, breathless. He stopped, but didn't turn. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't realize. I shouldn't have said what I said. It was rude." Evan faced her then. Her confidence had cracked, replaced by something like fear, or maybe embarrassment. He couldn't tell. "I know," he said. His voice was calm, neutral. It unsettled her more than anger would have. She searched his face for forgiveness, or permission, or absolution. He offered none. "I hope you enjoy the rest of the night." Then he walked away. In the elevator down, Evan stood alone, watching the numbers descend. He felt tired, older than his years. When the doors opened, he stepped into the quiet lobby, the light reflecting off marble and glass. Outside, the city waited. He pulled out his phone. A message from the babysitter glowed on the screen. Lily was asleep. Everything was fine. Evan smiled faintly and headed home, leaving the party behind, unaware that for her, the night was just beginning.
The next morning arrived quietly, without apology. Evan woke before his alarm, the way he often did, conditioned by years of responsibility that didn't pause for weekends or emotions. The apartment was still. Early light pressed gently through the blinds. He lay there for a moment, listening, grounding himself in the ordinary sounds of home. A floorboard settling, a distant siren, Lily's soft breathing from the next room. He rose, careful not to wake her, and made coffee the way he always did. Measured, unrushed. Routine was something he trusted. It didn't judge. It didn't surprise him. As the kettle warmed, his phone buzzed once on the counter. A message preview flashed, then disappeared. He ignored it. Mornings were for Lily. She padded into the kitchen a few minutes later, hair tangled, clutching her favorite sweater. "You went out," she said, not asking. Evan smiled, just for a bit. She studied his face the way children do, noticing what adults miss. "Did you have fun?" He considered the question. It was fine. She accepted that and climbed onto a chair, swinging her legs as he poured cereal. At school drop-off, Lily hugged him longer than usual. "You okay?" she whispered. Evan nodded. "Always." She didn't look convinced, but she let go. As he watched her disappear into the building, Evan felt the familiar pull between worlds. One where he was just a dad, blending in with other parents. Another where his name carried weight he never asked for. By mid-morning, the party had already become a topic of conversation. Emails, subtle references. A board member called, laughing about the surprise appearance. Evan kept his responses short. He declined an invitation to lunch. He signed documents. He approved budgets. He moved through his day like nothing had shifted, even though something had. Across the city, she sat alone at a small cafe, staring at a cold cup of coffee. Her name was Claire. The night before replayed itself on a loop she couldn't stop. The look on his face when she realized, the way the room had turned. She wasn't used to being on the wrong side of a story. She worked in public relations. Narratives were her job. Control was her currency. She had apologized. She told herself that should count. But his response had been worse than anger. It had been final, dismissive in the gentlest way. She checked her phone, half expecting a message, some acknowledgement. There was nothing. Claire closed her eyes, breathing out slowly. For the first time in a long while, she felt small. She didn't know why it mattered so much. She had embarrassed people before. It came with the territory. But this felt different, because he hadn't needed to prove anything, because he had simply walked away. She opened her laptop and searched his name. The articles were measured, sparse, no flashy headlines,
no scandal. A man who built quietly. A single parent mentioned once, in passing. She closed the browser. Evan's afternoon meeting ran long. As he left the conference room, his assistant caught up to him. "There's a request," she said carefully, "from Claire Hastings." Evan paused. The name settled. "What kind of request?" "She'd like to apologize, properly." Evan exhaled. "Tell her thank you, but it's not necessary." His assistant nodded, relieved. That should have been the end of it. Evan intended it to be. But 2 days later, Lily came home with a flyer for a school fundraiser. The venue address caught his eye. A familiar building, one he owned, leased to a non-profit years ago. He signed the form and didn't think about it again. The night of the fundraiser, Evan arrived early to help set up chairs. He wore jeans and a sweater, sleeves rolled up. Parents moved around him, unaware. He liked it that way. Lily ran off with friends, laughing. Evan adjusted a table and turned to find Claire standing a few feet away, holding a box of donated books. They froze at the same time. Claire's face flushed. "I didn't know," she said quickly. "I volunteer here sometimes." Evan nodded once. "It's a good program." Silence stretched. Awkward, but honest. Around them, people worked, chatted, lived. "I was wrong," Claire said finally. Not rushed, not defensive, not just rude, wrong. Evan looked at her. She wasn't asking for anything, just stating it. "All right," he said. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't dismissal. Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, can you help me?" Evan smiled at Claire briefly and followed his daughter. Claire watched them, something loosening in her chest. The night continued, small moments, shared tasks, no grand gestures, but when Evan left, he noticed she held the door for someone else, quietly, without looking for credit. Neither of them knew it yet, but something had shifted. Not resolved, just begun.
Time did what it always did. It moved forward, indifferent to unfinished thoughts. The weeks after the fundraiser settled into a strange, quiet rhythm. Evan didn't see Claire again right away, and that was intentional. He didn't avoid her, he simply didn't seek her out. His life had learned how to stay full without additions. Lily, work, evenings that ended early, dinners cooked with too much care, silence that felt earned. But absence didn't mean erasure. He found himself thinking about the way Claire had stood there with the box of books. No audience, no sharp edges, just someone doing something small because it needed doing. That detail lingered longer than it should have. At the office, a development proposal crossed his desk, a mixed-use community center tied to affordable housing and education programs. One of the partner organizations listed made him pause, the same nonprofit that ran Lily's fundraiser. Claire's name appeared again, this time as a communications lead assigned to the project. Evan leaned back in his chair. He could reassign it. He had every reason to. No one would question the decision. Instead, he read the proposal carefully. It was solid, thoughtful, focused on long-term impact instead of optics. He approved the next phase without comment. Their next interaction happened in a conference room with glass walls and neutral chairs. Professional, measured. Claire arrived early, notes prepared, posture straight. When Evan entered, she met his eyes briefly, then looked back to her folder. No smile, no tension, just awareness. The meeting moved smoothly. Claire spoke clearly, without embellishment. She didn't perform, she didn't posture. Evan noticed that too. When questions came, she answered directly. When she didn't know something, she said so. It was disarming. Afterward, as people filtered out, she lingered, not blocking the door, not forcing the moment. Evan gathered his papers.
"You did good work," he said, almost offhand. Claire nodded. "Thank you." That was all. But something subtle shifted after that. Emails became more frequent, still professional, still restrained, yet there was an ease that hadn't been there before. Respect, earned quietly. One evening, Evan picked Lily up late from an after-school program. She climbed into the car, chattering. "Claire was there today," she said casually. Evan kept his eyes on the road. "Oh? Yeah, she helped us paint signs. She's nice." Lily paused. She said she was sorry about something but didn't say what. Evan felt his grip tighten slightly on the steering wheel. People can be sorry. That matters. Weeks later, the community center hosted an open house. Evan attended, blending into the background again. Claire moved through the space with purpose, introducing donors, coordinating volunteers. At one point, their paths crossed near the back hallway. "Lily's art is on the wall," Claire said quietly. Evan followed her gaze. A crooked sun, bold colors. His chest warmed. "She worked hard on that." Claire smiled, soft and genuine. "It shows." They stood there longer than necessary, not speaking, not awkward, just present. Evan broke the silence. "Do you want coffee?" It surprised him as much as it did her. Claire blinked once. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." They sat at a small cafe nearby. No grand conversation, no revisiting the past. They spoke about work, about Lily's school, about things that didn't require defenses. Claire listened more than she talked. Evan noticed he didn't feel the need to explain himself. At one point, Claire said, "I used to think being sharp was the same as being strong." Evan stirred his coffee. "A lot of people do." She nodded. "I'm trying to unlearn that." He looked at her then. Really looked. Trying counts. The evening ended without promises, without expectations. Claire didn't reach for him. Evan didn't offer more than the moment. But as they parted, there was something steady between them. Not hope, not romance, something quieter. Trust beginning to form. That night, Evan tucked Lily into bed. She yawned, eyes heavy. "You seem lighter," she murmured. Evan smiled. "Maybe." She reached for his hand. "That's good." He stayed until she slept, then sat alone in the dim living room. He wasn't fixed, he wasn't healed, but for the first time in a long while, he felt open. Not exposed, open. And that made all the difference.
The truth rarely arrives all at once. It comes in small confirmations. Spring edged into the city quietly. Trees budded without asking permission. Sidewalks warmed. People lingered longer at crossings. Evan noticed these things now. He didn't force himself to. He just did. Claire didn't step fully into his life, and he didn't invite her to. What grew between them moved at a pace neither of them tried to control. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into shared silences that didn't ask to be filled. Lily joined them sometimes. Claire never tried to win her. She simply showed up. That mattered. One afternoon, Lily asked a question Evan had been expecting and avoiding. "Is Claire your girlfriend?" Evan paused, knife still in mid-chop over carrots. "No," he said honestly. Lily tilted her head. "Do you want her to be?" He considered the question carefully. "I want her to be someone who feels safe to be around," he said. Lily thought about that. She does, she decided, and went back to coloring. The building incident never came up again, not directly, but its echo lingered, quietly shaping what came next. Months later, Evan attended another formal event at the Orion, smaller, purpose-driven. Claire was there, speaking briefly about the community center's progress. She stood straighter now, still composed but grounded. When she finished, the room applauded politely. Afterward, a woman approached her, well-dressed, confident, the kind of person who once would have intimidated Evan. "You're impressive," she said to Claire. "You handled that beautifully." Claire thanked her. The woman smiled. "I remember you," she added, "from the fundraiser." Claire's expression didn't change. "I remember you too." Evan watched from a distance. He didn't need to. Later, as guests thinned, Claire found him by the windows. "Do you ever regret not correcting people?" she asked. Evan knew what she meant. "No," he said. "People tell you who they are when they think no one important is listening." She nodded. "I used to think power meant being louder." Evan looked at her. "What do you think now?" She smiled faintly. "I think it's about not needing to be." They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. Some things didn't require punctuation. The real turning point came quietly, the way meaningful things often do. One evening, Lily had a school performance. Evan sat in the front row, heart in his throat. Claire arrived late, slipping into a seat beside him without fuss. Lily spotted them from the stage and beamed. After the applause, she ran to them, breathless. "Did you see me?" "Every second," Evan said. Claire crouched down. "You were brave," she said. Lily considered that, then nodded solemnly. "I was." On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat. Claire watched her through the mirror. "She trusts you," she said softly. Evan met her eyes in the glass. "So do you," he replied. Claire exhaled, something releasing in her shoulders. They stopped in front of Claire's building. Evan didn't turn the engine off right away. "I don't want to rush," he said. Claire nodded. "Neither do I." He added, "But I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel something." Claire met his gaze. "Then don't." That was all. They built something after that. Not a spectacle, not a story meant for others, a life shaped by consistency, by honesty, by apologies made early and pride kept small. Claire never asked Evan to change. He never asked her to be softer. They adjusted instead, learned the shape of each other's boundaries. At the Orion, Evan still attended events, still moved unnoticed when he chose to. But now, sometimes, Claire stood beside him, not as proof, as presence. One night, long after Lily was asleep, Evan stood on the balcony of his apartment. The city stretched below, alive and indifferent. Claire joined him, handing him a mug. "You know," she said, "I never apologized for that night." Evan took the mug. "You didn't need to." She looked at him. "I did." He waited. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not for what I said, for who I was before I knew better." Evan nodded once. "Thank you." They stood there together, not holding each other, but not apart either. Healing didn't arrive as fireworks. It arrived as steadiness, as days that no longer felt heavy, as a child who slept peacefully, as a woman who chose growth over defense, as a man who no longer needed to hide his strength behind silence. And that was enough. Thank you for staying with this story until the end.